Here we are, 10 games into the 2024-2025 NBA season, and the Detroit Pistons, they have a record of 4-6. And if the NBA season was to conclude today, the Detroit Pistons would have a spot in the play-in tournament, and they have more wins than teams like the Milwaukee Bucks and the Philadelphia 76ers. So the Detroit Pistons, a lot of people would look at this 4-6. They wouldn't be impressed with that because it's 2 games below 500, but I think this is very impressive for the Detroit Pistons. And one thing I want to allude to, I don't know if anybody else has realized this. I'm not paying that much attention to all of the other teams in the NBA, just a handful of teams, but I think out of the teams that I've been paying attention to, the Detroit Pistons have easily had the toughest schedule to start the season. We look at their first 4 games of the year to where we got off to that 4-game losing streak, and I'm pretty sure we all have PTSD from last season. It's looking like we were heading down another rocky road, but if you watch those games, the Detroit Pistons, they look very good. And those first 4 teams that they played in the 4-game skid that we lost, I believe it was the Indiana Pacers, the Boston Celtics, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the New York Knicks. Now they looked really good against the Boston Celtics, the Indiana Pacers, and the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the New York Knicks kind of put it on us. But the Detroit Pistons, watching them in those 4 games, they look like a really good ball club, but they also still look super young, and they just had those moments in the games where their inexperience costed them. But from a talent standpoint, it did look like they belonged on the court with those teams. So I thought that was something to take, something positive to take away from that. And we see that paying off for the Detroit Pistons already. Playing tougher games in the beginning of the season, it is already helping the Detroit Pistons out. After losing their first 4 games, out of their next 6, they've won 4. They've won 4-2 in their next 6 games, and it could easily be 5 out of 6 if they didn't let that one slip away from the Charlotte Hornets. But my point is, when the Detroit Pistons, when they start to run into teams like the Atlanta Hawks, and they start to run into teams like the Charlotte Hornets, even though they didn't win that game, those type of games will be so much easier for the Detroit Pistons because they played tough teams to start the year, and they've also gotten a win over teams like the Los Angeles Lakers, who had LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and AD went for a monster game. So I think the Detroit Pistons, for the schedule that they've been handed to start this season, I think they've been ultra competitive, and we're seeing them get better each and every game. And to set that to the side, there's some other things that I'm looking at that indicate that the Detroit Pistons will continue to grow game to game in this NBA season. Now, another thing I want to look at, we talked about how the Detroit Pistons, they started this season off 0-4, and then recently they starting to turn it up a bit as they won 4 out of their last 6 ball games. But watching the Detroit Pistons, they're still not playing their best basketball. Looking at them statistically, and also watching the Detroit Pistons with their eyes, we can see that this young team could be so much better. But some of the stats I want to look at with the Detroit Pistons right now, they're turning the basketball over at a very, very high rate, and I don't expect that to last all season long. I think once they get those turnovers together, I think this offense is going to be so much better. And just imagine how much different these games would be if they were taking care of the basketball just a little bit more. So that's one thing that I've been looking at. And then also the offense. The offense isn't firing on all cylinders like it could be right now. Right now, the Detroit Pistons, if I'm not mistaken, they're around 22nd in the lead in offensive rating, and they also rank around the same spot when it comes to 3-point shooting. But I'm not too alarmed about the 3-point shooting because it's the best shooters on the teams that shooters on the team that's struggling from 3 right now. Cade Cunningham is shooting 33% from 3 right now, and I know that number is going to go up. Tobias Harris, before the game against the Atlanta Hawks, he was robbing the Detroit Pistons, and I don't want to be too harsh, but we have to keep it real. Tobias Harris, he was not knocking down those 3-point shots coming into that game. Coming into the game against the Atlanta Hawks, he was shooting just 16% from 3. And if you watch the Pistons, he's getting very high quality open looks. his shot isn't falling. And then he finally broke out of that shooting slump against the Atlanta Hawks, where he knocked down 5 3-pointers. So that was a very bright sign for the Detroit Pistons. But one of the better shooters on the team, Tobias Harris, he's only shooting 25% from 3 so far this season. Fontecchio, who proved he was a sniper last season, is only knocking down 30% of his 3-pointers. And also Malik Beasley is also only hitting his threes at a 33% clip right now. And Jaden Ivey, he's actually been super accurate from 3 so far this season, shooting over 40% from 3-point land. So we look at the Detroit Pistons, they're struggling offensively right now because the guys are struggling shooting the basketball, but we know that these guys can knock down 3-point shots. So once they get into full rhythm, we'll start to see how serious this offense could get. And just watching this offense right now, even though they're just 22nd in the league in offensive rating, it's a completely different offense. There's a lot more spacing because you still have to respect those guys that we just talked about. You still have to respect Cade Cunningham as a 3-point shooter. You still have to respect Tobias Harris as a 3-point shooter. You still have to respect Malik Beasley as a 3-point shooter. And I don't want to forget to mention Tim Hardaway Jr. He's also knocking down his 3-point shot at a very high clip right now, over 40% from 3-point land. But having these shooters in the offense for the Detroit Pistons has made the biggest difference in the world for Cade Cunningham, for Jaden Ivey. But we see the run that Cade Cunningham is on right now. He's had 3 straight games getting a triple-double, doing something that only Grant Hill has done in Pistons history. So that's really cool to see. And if you guys, we've been talking about the Pistons for years now. We've been talking about Cade Cunningham from years now, and we already knew this is something that he had inside of him. And we always compared him to guys like LeBron James. We always compared him to guys like Luka Doncic, and he doesn't play like those guys at all. I'm just talking about the overall impact that he has on the game, the ability to take over a game with his rebounding, the ability to take over a game with his scoring, and the ability to take over a game with his playmaking. But he plays completely different than those guys. I love Cade Cunningham's style of play. He makes the toughest things look so simple, and I love how when he does something so tough, he runs back on defense like nothing's happens, because he knows how hard he works on his game. So Cade Cunningham, he has been amazing over this 6-game stretch for the Detroit Pistons. He's having a tremendous season so far, but I'm loving how these new pieces are helping him in a positive way. Tobias Harris being a threat on the court, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., Fontecchio, all these guys stretching the floor. They help Cade Cunningham, and they also help out Jaden Ivey. And Cade Cunningham, I'm not going to sit up here and act like he's been playing perfect. He's had a lot of high turnover games, but I think those numbers are going to come down and calm down a bit. Like we said, the Detroit Pistons, they started this season off to face some of the best teams in the NBA, and also some of the best defenses and best individual defenders in the NBA. So I cut them some slack there, but Cade Cunningham, he is the floor general, the point guard for this team, and he has to help them cut down on them turnovers. I think sometimes the Detroit Pistons, that offense gets too stagnant, or they run the same play over and over too many times. We look at that game against the Atlanta Hawks, they kind of got a bunch of turnovers in a row on the same play over and over. So I think if we see a little bit more fluidity on the offensive side of the ball and some more play calls, I think that'll clean that all up and stop them from becoming so predictable at all times. But other than that, right now, I think the Detroit Pistons are looking really good offensively. Defensively, they've been pretty solid, ranking 14th in the league when it comes to defensive rating, and they don't even have their best defender, and Asar Thompson, and all the prayers goes to him right now. I know blood clots are very serious, and I know what they did to Chris Bosh's basketball career. I'm not sure how serious it is with the Asar Thompson, but it really is heartbreaking, because if you watch the Thompson twins, watch his interviews with him and his brother, he really, really loves the game of basketball, and he works really hard of it. So for him to not be unavailable for that type of injury is very sad. But nonetheless, the Detroit Pistons, they've been without their best perimeter defender and one of their best rebounders, and Asar Thompson, and they've still been pretty decent on the defensive side of the ball. They're giving a lot of effort. They're giving a lot of energy. Guys like Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley, Jaden Ivey. We saw in the most recent win against the Atlanta Hawks, We saw Jaden Ivey take on Trae Young, who was having a sensational second half against the Detroit Pistons. He took him on the isolation play. Trae Young blow right past him. Beef Stew rotates up to help Jaden Ivey, and Cade Cunningham helps the helper, and he gets the game-winning block right after scoring the game-winning basket. And shout out to Cade Cunningham. That was a very tough assignment that he had on him tonight. And Dyson Daniels, if you're not familiar with Dyson Daniels, he is a player that specializes on the defensive side of the ball. He was drafted by the New Orleans Pelicans, and he was giving Cade Cunningham pressure the entire game. But I think Cade handled it really well, and he handled it really well down the stretch. That layup that he got, that left-handed lay, that contested left-handed lay, was so tough. And then we see him get that lay, and he just run back on defense like nothing happened. I love when players do stuff like that. But I think the Detroit Pistons right now so far this season, I think they've shown us a lot. I think they've shown us a lot to be optimistic about, and we already know what our expectations were coming into this season. It wasn't the strongest draft class. Not that many players that seem like they could change a franchise, but you never know. There's always sleepers in the draft. And then also no really crazy free agency moves outside of bringing in Tobias Harris and then the other three-point shooters. So we know this is essentially the same team from last year. We just want to see them be more competitive, and hopefully we could crack that play-in tournament. And I think it's very possible, especially with the way that Cade Cunningham is trending. And this is all we talked about. We said that the Detroit Pistons get any type of perimeter shooting around Cade Cunningham, he will be an all-NBA player, and he will be heading to the All-Star game. So it's been really cool to see how things are falling into place for the Detroit Pistons, but they're nowhere near playing their best brand of basketball just yet, and I think they're going to be able to achieve that this season. But that's what I want to talk about with you guys today. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, comment down below if you agree or disagree, and then subscribe for more weekly content. We do this all the time, man, and that's curtains.